Hello students, welcome to our online video tutorial class. I think you have seen the previous videos whatever I have made on the chapter sexual reproduction in flowering plant. If you have seen the previous video, there I have discussed about the outbreeding devices as well as the types of pollination based on the various kind of agents. So today I am starting from the next point, and that is pollen pistil interaction, because after outbreeding device, that is the next point present in our chapter according to the syllabus. So let's see what is pollen pistil interaction. First of all, we have to know about the definition of the pollen pistil interaction, and the definition is when the pollen is getting transferred on the surface of the stigma. So obviously in between the pollen grain and the stigma there is one interaction is happening, and due to that interaction, as a result, pollen tube is forming from the surface of the pollen grain. That means the male gametophytic development, it will happen. So this entire phenomenon of interaction, and for that reason the pollen tube, whatever it is produced, that is commonly known as, or this interaction is commonly known as pollen pistil interaction. So let's see whatever it is written in the definition. Pollen pistil interaction is a sequence of events that occur from the time of pollen deposition over the stigma till to the time of entry of pollen tube inside the ovule, and the process has checks at several places for the promotion or inhibition of the pollen growth. So except the last line, if you see the remaining lines, obviously this is denoting about the definition of pollen pistil interaction. So we obviously have understood about the pollen pistil interaction definition. So let's see the mechanism of the pollen pistil interaction in very short. Step by step mechanism of pollen pistil interaction. So this is the, in very short, the pollen pistil interaction is mentioned. First one, pollination is happening, that means pollen grain is transferring on the surface of stigma. After transferring, the pollen is getting adhered with the stigma surface. After adhering, the pollen is getting hydrated. Hydrated means obviously on the surface of stigma we all know there is a sticky substance present, and that sticky substance is absorbed by the help of pollen grain. And when the pollen grain is absorbing that specific sticky substance or sticky nutrition, then the pollen grain is getting hydrated, because through that sticky substance water is entering, and that is commonly known as pollen hydration. Next, after the pollen hydration, obviously the pollen is ready for germinating. That means the inner layer of the pollen grain, that is the intine layer, it will start coming outside, and that is forming the pollen tube, and this is biologically known as pollen germination. After pollen germination, the pollen tube which is formed, it is entering within the stigma or through the stigma within the style portion. Then the pollen tube growth, it will start through the style, because it will start moving towards the ovary portion, and pollen tube entry into the ovule, that means through the micropylar aperture that pollen tube is entering at last within the ovule. Maybe that ovule is orthotropous or anatropous, but the pollen tube always it will enter within that ovule through the micropylar aperture. If orthotropous ovule, on that time we all know the micropylar aperture will be facing upward, so the pollen tube will enter within ovule directly. But if the ovule is anatropous ovule, that means through the lateral side the pollen tube will rotate or it will bend, and then from lower portion it will just enter within the ovule through the micropyle. So this is overall in a short process the pollen pistil interaction is mentioned here, but in the next slide we will be showing this mechanism in an elaborate manner. So let's see the next figure. This is actually the pollen pistil interaction in very short. This is the pollen which is getting attached with the surface of the stigma, and we all know that on the surface of stigma also several outgrowths are present which are actually responsible for capturing the pollen grain. Then next, pollen adhesion is happening with the surface of the stigma. Then pollen grain is getting hydrated, it is getting swollen. Next, obviously the intine layer, it will start forming the pollen tube, that means the germination process has occurred. Next, the pollen tube will start penetrating the upper callus wall or upper layer of the stigma, and it will start entering within the female reproductive tract. Then obviously you can see this is the pollen tube has entered within the female reproductive tract, and it will start growing towards the ovary, and this is actually the pollen pistil interaction which is happening on the surface of stigma. So let's see for the elaborate interaction in between this pollen grain and stigma surface. Here first of all it is written pollen falls on the stigma, we all know, After that, pollen interacts with the stigma by the mucilaginous outgrowth of the pollen grain with the papillonaceous outgrowth of the stigma. In the previous figure just now you have seen these are the outgrowths which are present on the surface of stigma. Those are known as papillonaceous outgrowth, and on the surface of exine of the pollen grain, that is containing mucilaginous outgrowth. So these two outgrowths, when they are interacting with each other, then only the pollen tube is forming. But before that also, interaction determines the compatibility in between pollen grain and stigma. Whether the pollen grain has come from the same flower, or the pollen grain has come from the different flower, or from the different species of flower, that compatibility is determined on the surface of stigma only, because when the interaction is happening in between the pollen grain and stigma, stigma obviously try to judge the pollen grain whether it has come from the same flower or the different flower, or from the different species of plant even. If the pollen grain is found that it is coming from the same species of flower or same species of plant, then it will be get accepted, and then stigma start releasing a sticky fluid. Before that there was no sticky fluid, so just the pollen grain is getting accepted, then only the stigma will start secreting the sticky fluid, and that is containing the liquid, gum, resin and fructose. So that specific substances, these specific substances will be there within the sticky fluid released by the stigma surface of female reproductive part, that is gynoecium. Just the sticky fluid secretion it will start. Next you can see the fluid released by the stigma absorbed by the pollen grain. Obviously the pollen grain will be absorbing that fluid which is present on the surface of stigma. Here, before going to the next point, I am just showing you the previous slide. Here you can see here self incompatibility. What is that? Sometimes it is found that the pollen grain may be from same flower or same species of flower is not getting accepted by the stigma surface, because both are containing genetic makeup. Those genetic makeups are different. Both pollen grain and stigma are containing that genetic makeup, and that genetic makeup is different from each other, and for that reason maybe that pollen grain is belonging from self flower, but after that also that pollen grain is incompatible for that stigma. So for that reason on that time it will not be accepted, and if it will not be accepted by the stigma surface, on that time stigma will not release any kind of sticky secretion, and obviously pollen grain will not be getting nourished, not be getting hydrated. Okay, pollen grain germinates by the help of some enzymes, obviously alkaline phosphatase, ribonuclease, esterase and amylase. These are the following enzymes which are released by the pollen grain, and these enzymes are helping the pollen grain to germinate. Germinate means to produce the pollen tube. Cutinase is another enzyme which can degrade the cutin layer present on the surface of stigma as well as inside style. That means cutinase is another enzyme. It is released by the stigma, and it is responsible for degrading the cutin layer present on the surface of stigma as well as inside the style. And if the cutin layer is properly degraded, then only the pollen tube can enter within the style through the stigma in a proper manner. Now pollen grain can form single or multiple pollen tube, because if one pollen grain is accepted, then obviously one pollen tube will be forming. But if multiple pollen grains have been accepted, obviously multiple pollen tube will be formed from from every pollen grain. So, but always keep it in your mind, one tube from one pollen grain only remain active, remaining all kind of pollen tubes which are formed, they remain inactive, because through multiple pollen tubes, if multiple male gametes will start coming, obviously there should be a problem during the time of double fertilization. So for that reason, according to the common or normal phenomenon, only one pollen tube remain active, and within that whatever the male gametes are present, they are only remain active for further double fertilization. Ovule also starts secreting some chemical substances so that it can attract the pollen tube towards it, and the pollen tube also can go towards the ovule without any hesitation, without any problem, because ovule also is providing the chemical signal to the pollen tube, and it will be going smoothly to the ovule. When the pollen tube is moving down through the style, then cytoplasm comes to the tip of the pollen tube. Obviously when the pollen tube is moving down through the style, sometimes it is found the cytoplasm is coming to the tip of the pollen tube, and for that case the pollen tube is running faster. But for inhibiting that or for restricting that, cytoplasm is getting restricted in a specific interval or in a specific distance interval by the help of callous wall. Because if the callous wall will not be formed, cytoplasm will be there always in the front of or apical portion of the pollen tube, and the pollen tube will be running very faster rate towards the ovule. But that specific faster rate movement of the pollen tube is really problematic for the double fertilization. So for that reason, the movement of the cytoplasm cannot be very smooth in a specific distance interval. The plant itself is making the callous wall so that the cytoplasm movement will be getting restricted or inhibited during its movement through the style. Okay, so in this figure you can see properly this specific phenomenon. This is suppose the pollen grain from where the pollen tube has been formed, and you can see from the surface of the pollen tube callous plug will start forming, and these are actually blocking the entire lumen so that the cytoplasm can't move in a higher speed or higher velocity, and in a specific distance interval you can see these callous plugs are produced, and those are actually commonly producing the callous wall, so that the cytoplasm cannot move in a very smooth manner. It will be getting the restriction during its movement. Okay, so this is overall the pollen pistil interaction, whatever just I have discussed. After pollen pistil interaction, the next mechanism or the next process we have to study, that is double fertilization. So let's see about the double fertilization. We all know double fertilization is a such kind of mechanism which is commonly found in case of flowering plants or angiospermic plant, where one sperm cell of a pollen grain fertilizing one egg cell, forming that zygote, and second male gamete fusing with the two polar nuclei cell which are present in the central position of the ovule and forming triploid body or triploid cell, that is called as endosperm or primary endosperm nucleus. So this is actually the process by where two times the fertilization is happening. One is in between the first male gamete and the egg cell forming the zygote, and second fertilization is in between second male gamete with the two polar nuclei present centrally of the embryo sac. So automatically two times the fertilization is happening, or you can say rather here three times the fusion is happening. That's why this double fertilization procedure can be also known as triple fusion, and due to the triple fusion only the endosperm is, or the primary endosperm nucleus, it is getting formed, because endosperm formation is actually known as triple fusion, and overall the process is known as double fertilization. So let's see the procedure of the double fertilization in this slide. You can see here all angiosperms undergo double fertilization. It is a major defining characteristics of the angiosperm, we all know. In double fertilization process, two sperms or two male gametes nuclei fertilize the ovule. This we all know. When the pollen grain lands on the stigma of a flower, it starts germinating and forming a pollen tube which grows down the style to the ovary, which contains the ovule. That means actually the pollen tube will start moving towards the ovule, and ovule is also giving the chemical signal to the pollen tube so that it can come to ovule, or it can come up to its proper destination smoothly without any kind of problem in the way. The two sperm nuclei or the male gamete migrate down the pollen tube into the ovule, and obviously keep it in your mind, during the double fertilization with the two male gametes, obviously tube nucleus is also present, because that tube nucleus is providing the nourishment to the two male gametes, and this tube nucleus always will be there in the front of the pollen tube, and after that only two male gametes will be present. And throughout the entire way, when the two male gametes will be moving, it will be found that the tube nucleus size will be getting reduced gradually, because it is providing the nutrition to both of the male gametes, and that's why only the size of the tube nucleus is gradually reducing. And you can see one more thing, that when the male gametes are entering within the ovule through the micropyle, on that time there is no tube nucleus, because throughout the entire way the entire quantity of the tube nucleus has got totally exhausted. So now the point is fourth point, each ovule has a cell at one end that is pollinated by one of the sperm nuclei. Here actually it is talking about the egg cell, and the egg cell is fertilized by the first male gamete, and that is forming the diploid zygote, and that diploid zygote grows into the embryo and ultimately into the sporophytic plant body. Always keep it in your mind, because whatever the zygote has been formed, that will be always forming diploid sporophytic plant body. Next, the ovule also has the two nuclei in the center. Those are commonly known as polar nuclei, which join with the other sperm nuclei or the male gamete and forming a triploid tissue or the triploid cell, and that is known as endosperm or primary endosperm nucleus. The endosperm thus contains two maternal haploid genome and one haploid genome from the paternal, that means from the male gamete. So obviously here the fusion is happening in between the three cells. So for that reason it can be also called as triple fusion. And the endosperm which will be formed, that is developing into a nutritive tissue used by the germinating seed. So obviously it will be developing into nutritive tissue, and that will be further providing the nutrition or nourishment to the germinating seed. So this is overall the entire the process of double fertilization. In the next slide you can see properly the figure of the double fertilization. This is the egg cell surrounded by, or on the both sides there is a synergid. When the pollen tube enters, first the male gamete is fertilizing with the egg and forming the zygote, and second male gamete already you can see it is fertilizing with the two polar nuclei forming the endosperm or triploid endosperm nucleus or primary endosperm nucleus, that is triploid. So zygote 2n and endosperm is 3n. So here the 2 times fertilization, that's why double fertilization. Okay, I think this double fertilization mechanism is also very much clear to you, like pollen pistil interaction. Going to the next slide. Here pollen post fertilization structure and event we will be discussing. This is the last portion of this chapter, and within this portion we will be discussing about the endosperm, embryo, seed, fruit, apomixis and polyembryony. These are the portions we have to discuss under this last point. So first of all we are start discussing about the endosperm. First of all, we all know what is endosperm. The endosperm is a tissue produced inside the seeds of the most of the flowering plants following fertilization mechanism. It is triploid in most species because 3n containing. It surrounding the embryo and provides the nourishment in the form of starch. Though it can also contain oil and protein, this can make endosperm a source of nutrition in animal diet also. That means endosperm, which is actually the product of double fertilization or triple fusion, it is there present within the seed, specifically within the monocot seed, because the quantity of the endosperm within the monocot seed is more than the dicot seed. So that endosperm remains stored within the monocot seed, and it is responsible for providing the nourishment to the embryo, and the embryo is developing. And another more important thing is that endosperm is not only containing starch, it is also containing oil and protein. That means carbohydrate, protein, fat, all are present within the endosperm. That means overall development of the embryo, it will happen in a very smooth manner. Process of endosperm formation, already we have discussed. One sperm nucleus fertilizes the egg cell forming a zygote, while the other sperm nucleus usually fuses with the binucleate central cell, that is the polar nuclei cell, forming primary endosperm nucleus or cell. That cell created in the process of double fertilization develops into endosperm. So this is actually the source of endosperm. We all know because we have discussed the endosperm formation procedure in the double fertilization procedure only. So no need to discuss these points again. This is very easy. Going for the next point about what we have to discuss here, that is embryogeny. What is embryogeny? Embryogeny is actually the process of formation and the growth of embryo that is happening within the seed, and that is also happening for endosperm only. So this is commonly known as embryogeny. Next point is that embryogeny steps, whatever the steps of embryogeny is there actually. First one, that is the proembryo. Proembryo is the initial form of the embryo in a flowering plant that denotes the series of cells that are formed after fertilization within the ovule of a plant before formation of the embryo, that is mature embryo. That means before formation of mature embryo, the first embryo or the initial embryo, that is actually the cell mass, and that is formed after the fertilization just from the zygote, that is commonly known as proembryo or proembryonic stage. Proembryo is further getting developed into globular shaped embryo. This is obviously happened due to the spherical expansion of the proembryo structure, and keep it in your mind, lost as cotyledons begin to form. That means this specific globular embryo will be start losing when the cotyledon structure or the first leaf like structure, it will start forming. On that time only the globular shape of the embryo, it will be get lost. Okay, so first initial embryo, that is a proembryo has come, and then globular embryo, globular shaped embryo has come. Next, dicots have two cotyledons which give the embryo a heart-shaped structure. Specifically, if you study the dicot plants or dicot seeds, you will see there, due to the presence of two cotyledons, the embryo is obtaining the heart-shaped appearance or heart-shaped structure. From that, globular structure. The axial body plan is evident by the heart stage of the development. That means actually there is an embryonal axis present, that is get proved or proven by the help of this heart-shaped embryo. So this has come after developing that globular shaped embryo. Next, upright cotyledons can give to the embryo a torpedo shape. Keep it in your mind, the cotyledons which are present or which are facing towards upward or upright, those are actually providing the shape, that is the torpedo shape, and this specific torpedo shape is actually coming from the heart shape only. Next, at last the mature embryo will be formed. That means from the torpedo shape the mature embryo form or mature embryonic stage it will be getting formed, and that is the last stage, it's formed. Clear? So this is overall throughout these two specific slides we have discussed about the embryogeny process, and under that how the embryogeny is happening from starting from pro-embryo, globular embryo, then heart-shaped embryo, torpedo-shaped embryo, and mature embryo. So this is overall the embryonic development which is happening from the zygote, and it is obviously happening within the ovule structure. Next, there is presence of the next portion, and the next portion is embryo structure. What about the embryo structure? Because already we have discussed about embryo formation. Now we have to discuss about the embryo structure. First of all, we will be discussing about the dicot embryo structure. You can see your dicot embryo structure in the right hand side. So let's see whatever the parts are present here. First part is that presence of two cotyledons. Obviously it is a dicot embryo, so for that reason two cotyledons will be present. Second, plumule is present giving rise to the stem. Here you can see the plumule part. This portion is exclusively responsible for providing the stem, or it is giving rise to the stem. Next part is radicle. Radicle is this portion, and this blunt portion is exclusively giving rise to the root. Keep it in your mind, no covering is present for the plumule as well as no covering is present for the radicle, because no coleoptile and coleorhiza will be present in case of dicot embryo. Next, below the cotyledon obviously there is a portion that is commonly known as hypocotyle, and above the cotyledon the portion, this portion you can say or you can consider this portion as a epicotyle. So this is hypocotyle, this is epicotyle. At last you can say the root cap is actually present, which is protecting the apex portion of the radicle. So this is overall the comma shaped structure, or rather it is a structure of the dicot embryo, and these points we have to just study. Next there is the structure of monocot embryo, because after dicot embryo we have to discuss about the monocot embryo. In this specific embryonic structure, it is comparatively quite complex structure than the dicot embryo. You can see here the presence of a single cotyledon. This is a single cotyledon. This is known as scutellum. Here one more thing, plumule is present covered by the covering, that is called as coleoptile. Here you can see the coleoptile which is covering the plumule portion. This is the plumule portion, this almost light green color, that is covered by this coleoptile. Below the coleoptile there is a presence of shoot apex. That means this is the shoot apex from where the further shoot will be produced. Here in the side you can see there is a presence of epiblast. Epiblast is a small projection which will further produce the body covering of the embryo, that is entire body covering or extra embryonic membrane like structure in embryo. Radicle is also present here, which is giving the birth of root in future, and this radicle is first of all covered by the root cap, and this root cap is at next covered by a covering that is known as coleorhiza. It is written coleoptile, but it is written wrongly. Actually it is coleorhiza. So this is actually the overall structure of the monocot embryo. Presence of scutellum, that is a single cotyledon, then presence of the coleoptile which is covering the plumule, and then below the plumule there is a presence of shoot apex, then there is a presence of an extension that is epiblast, then the lower portion that is containing radicle that is covered by the root cap, and at last there is a covering of the radicle also that is known as coleorhiza. So I think the difference in between dicot embryo and monocot embryo is very much clear to each and everyone. I think you have understood also properly. Going for the seed structure, after embryo structure there is a portion. First of all, we have to know about the types of seeds. We all know there is a type of two seeds. There is a monocot seed and dicot seed, because monocot seeds will be present in monocot plants and dicot seeds will be present in dicot plant. Here one more thing I want to say, that monocot seeds are commonly known as albuminous seeds or endospermic seeds, and dicot seeds are commonly known as non-albuminous or ex-albuminous seeds. Why? Because in case of, or non-endospermic seeds also, because in case of monocot seed, keep it in your mind, endospermic content is high or quite in more quantity. That's why that can be known as endospermic seed or albuminous seed. But keep it in your mind, in case of dicot seed, obviously the endosperm content is very less, as well as albumin protein is also absent. So for that reason, that is known as non-albuminous or exalbuminous or non-endospermic seed. So the difference in between monocot and dicot seed is written here. The seeds have residual endosperm. Residual endosperm means a sufficient quantity of endosperm is present in case of this seed. Non-albuminous seed, that means the seed where residual endosperm is not there, because the endosperm quantity, if it is present also, that is very less, and most of the time this is absent in case of this kind of seed. Albuminous seeds, example wheat, castor and maize, because these are all examples of the monocot seed, and these examples of the non-albuminous or dicot seed, that is pea, groundnut and beans. These are all the examples of dicot seed. So this is actually the difference of monocot and dicot seed. Okay, it can be also told as albuminous seed, monocot seed or endospermic seed, and your dicot seed can be also called as non-endospermic seed or non-albuminous or exalbuminous seed. I think this difference also is very much clear to everyone. Now we are just seeing the structure of the dicot seed very clearly. These are the two cotyledons present in the dicot seed. This is the embryonal axis. Upper portion is known as plumule, lower portion is known as radicle. Plumule has no covering, radicle has also no covering, as usual we have studied in the dicot embryo structure. This is the two halves when they are present in joint condition in case of dicot seed, and the lower portion, there you can see the aperture, that is micropyle, and there is a presence of a groove where the funicle or funicle is attached, that is commonly known as hilum. So this is overall the structure of the dicot seed. So let's see whatever the points we have to note down, or whatever the points we have to keep remember about the dicot seed. Dicot seeds, it's written already, contains two cotyledon. Already I have told, presence of seed coat, that is outer seed coat, that is testa, and inner seed coat, that is tegmen. Obviously the seed coats will be present. Centrally located embryonal axis, already we have seen in both of the both sides there are both cotyledons are present, and between the both there is embryonal axis present. Plumule is present from where the shoot arises, and radicle is also present in the diagram where the root arises. No covering of the radicle and plumule present, already that I have told. That means there is no presence of coleorhiza and coleoptile. Next, presence of less quantity of endosperm present or albumin protein present. That's why they are called as exalbuminous or seed or non-endospermic seed. Okay, the less quantity of endosperm, that's why it is known as non-endospermic seed. Keep it in your mind, in case of dicot seed structure, hilum is present, that is the groove where the funicle is attached to the ovule, as well as micropylar aperture is present through which the pollen tube enters during the time of double fertilization. So whatever the points we have discussed, based on this specific structure only we have discussed. See the structure again before going to the next slide. Okay, then I am moving for the next slide. Monocot seed structure, here also the same thing. Monocot seed structure is also containing the seed coat and fruit wall at external side. There is another striped layer you can see in the diagram, and that is known as aleuron layer or albumin protein layer. That's why this seed is known as albuminous seed. Next, this is the larger portion or endospermic portion, and the endospermic storage in case of monocot seed is very high. That's why this endosperm portion is so much bigger. Next, this specific shield like structure or the covering, which is actually the cotyledon, and this is called as scutellum. Next, you can see there is a presence of plumule, which is providing the birth of shoot, and the radicle, which is providing the birth of root. But here the plumule and radicle both are covered by the coleoptile and coleorhiza, these two structure, and this specific embryonal axis is present obliquely. So let's see about the entire points whatever I have told just now. Presence of outer seed coat and fruit layer, already we have seen in the diagram. Presence of aleuron protein layer, that's why they are known as albuminous seed, or as well as endospermic content is very high, so for that reason it can be also called as endospermic seed also. Presence of shield like single cotyledon, and that is known as scutellum. Presence of embryo in the corner, and that is present obliquely, because so that the embryonal axis also will be present in an oblique manner. Plumule radicle both will be present like the dicot seed, but plumule will be covered by the coleoptile and radicle will be covered by the coleorhiza, and this coleoptile coleorhiza was not there in case of dicot seed structure. So this is overall the structure of the monocot seed. Again, see the similarity, whatever the points I have told, all are written here, all are labeled here or not properly. Next is that fruit structure. Fruit structure, we will be discussing first of all about the types of fruit. Whatever the types of fruit commonly we can see, there are two types of the fruits commonly we can see. One is true fruit, another one is false fruit. What is true fruit? True fruit is a type of fruit which is commonly or generally forming from the fertilized ovary of the flower. That means if the ovary of the flower is giving birth of the fruit and the ovule present within the ovary giving birth of the seed, then the fruit is known as true fruit. Example, mulberry, fig, pineapple, grapes, these are all the example of true fruit. Even mango also is the example of the true fruit, because there the ovary is forming the fruit and ovule is forming the seed. But there is another type of the fruit is also present, that is commonly known as false fruit. Why it is called false fruit? Because it arises from the other floral part, specifically from the thalamus part or receptacle part of the flower, because thalamus or receptacle portion is also very much fleshy in case of some of the flowers. So for that reason, that thalamus or receptacle is providing the birth of ovary. Keep it in your mind, in case of false fruit the seeds will be also present, but those seeds have not come from the ovule portion. Example, apple, pineapple, banana, these are the examples of the false fruit, because they are not having or they are not produced from the ovary structure, they are produced from the thalamus or receptacle portion. Next we are seeing the another type of the fruit, and that is known as, this is actually the figure of the true fruit and false fruit. Here the true fruit, that is the figure of the mango has been given, and this is the figure of the false fruit which is given. So this is the difference in between the true fruit and false fruit. Here it has been written fleshy thalamus is given birth of the mesocarp portion of the fruit, and it actually, this portion has come from the calyx portion. So this is overall the structure of the false fruit, and this is already you know, this is the structure of the true fruit, where outer layer, fruit layer, that is epicarp, then the fleshy portion that is known as mesocarp, then the covering of the seed, that is endocarp, and after that the internal seed coat is present and seed is present. Okay. So this is the figure of mango, this is the figure of apple. There is another type of the fruit can be also present, that is parthenocarpic fruit. What is parthenocarpic fruit? Parthenocarpic fruit is a type of fruit which is actually formed without any fertilization of the ovule, and for that reason they are actually, or they are totally seedless fruit. So these specific type of fruits are produced without fertilization. That's why ovule or seeds are not present within the fruit. Those are known as parthenocarpic fruit. Keep it in your mind, parthenocarpic fruit nowadays can be made by application of the plant hormone, that is auxin. And this specific type of parthenocarpic fruit examples will be, as an example, orange will be the example, banana will be the example, then guava is the example, papaya is the example, fig is the example. So nowadays we are actually, grapes are the example. These are the examples of the parthenocarpic fruit which are actually seedless fruit, and already I have told you why the seedless they are. Next there is a apomixis or parthenogenesis. What is parthenogenesis? That also we know. Apomixis was defined by the scientist Hans Winkler, and he has told this is the replacement of the normal sexual reproduction by the asexual reproduction, because there is no fertilization is happening, but the ovule is producing the seed-like structure. Apomixis and parthenocarpy, there is one difference only. In case of parthenocarpy, seedless fruit production is happening without fertilization. Here fertilization is not taking place obviously, but seedless fruit is not forming, seed containing fruit is forming in case of this apomixis or parthenogenesis. And we have already seen this parthenogenesis phenomenon in case of some of the animals also in the first chapter. So this is very much clear to us. Next, types of apomixis. What are the types of apomixis? Apomixis can be of two types. One is apospory, another one is apogamy. Keep it in your mind, apospory is the development of 2n gametophyte from the sporophytic plant body. Again I am repeating, apospory means when the sporophytic plant body is getting converted into gametophytic plant body. Commonly or normally sporophytic plant body or the spores are getting converted into gametes by the help of meiosis cell division, and the chromosome number is getting half or getting haploid. But here in case of apospory condition, there is no fertilization is taking place, so for that reason no meiosis, and for that reason sporophytic plant body or the spores who are having 2n number of chromosome containing, that same 2n number of chromosomes will be present within the gametes also. Another part, that is apogamy. You can see here the gametophytic plant body, normally when it is converted to the sporophytic plant body, obviously the fertilization is taken place because the gametes are fertilizing with each other and forming the sporophytic plant body, that is 2n number of chromosome containing. But here during the apomixis, the apogamy, during the apomixis, this specific gametophytic plant body will be converted to the sporophytic plant body without any fertilization, without any fusion of gametes, and for that reason sporophytic plant body will be containing haploid number of chromosome containing cells. and these are the vegetative cells of the gametophyte will be formed. So these are the two types of apomixis. One is apospory, sporophytic to gametophytic plant regeneration, and the gametophytic will be 2n like sporophytic. Another apogamy, that is gametophytic to sporophytic plant generation, and the sporophytic will be haploid like the gametophytic here. Next and the last topic for this chapter, that is polyembryony. From the polyembryony, we can understand the definition. Polyembryony is the phenomenon of two or more than two embryo developing from a single fertilized egg, or maybe sometimes from the remaining cells of the embryo sac. If they are also providing the birth of embryo, then that process is commonly known as polyembryony. That means if the zygote will be formed, and after that if the zygote will be fragmentized into multiple embryo, that can be called as polyembryony, as well as if mistakenly or accidentally the male gametes will be fertilizing with the antipodal cell or fertilizing with the polar nuclei and forming the embryo, then also multiple embryo can be formed. So that is commonly known as polyembryony. Here two types of polyembryony can be found. One is the antipodal. There are two types of embryo has been formed commonly. One is zygotic embryo, that is commonly formed due to the fertilization of the first male gamete with the egg. But if the second male gamete will be fertilization with the polar nuclei cells, then it will be considered as polar nuclei embryo. And if the second male gamete will be fertilizing with antipodal cells, on that time antipodal embryo will be taking birth or will be formed. So zygotic embryo, antipodal embryo and polar nuclei embryo can be formed. And when the more than two embryo will be forming in this phenomenon or in this event, obviously this will be considered as the polyembryony. So this is the polyembryony portion where the multiple embryo are forming. Okay, so after polyembryony our slide is getting finished, because this chapter is getting finished with the polyembryony. So I think the entire chapter, whatever I have told, starting from the pollen pistil interaction, then the double fertilization mechanism, then the post fertilization structures and events, all these portions I think is very much clear to each and every one, and I think you have enjoyed this video a lot. So thank you for seeing and listening this video.